Some jobs are made for people who don't want to be found. At least, that's how they pitched it to me. A 6-week contract in the high Arctic, manning an old relay station that was once used for military communications, and now supposedly used for scientific data transfers. It's a cold, quiet post in the middle of nowhere. Full pay up front, no cell signal or Wi-Fi, and, most importantly, no people. I signed before I even finished reading the offer. It wasn't that I needed the money, though I did. It wasn't even about the escape, at least not entirely. It was about the silence, about wiping everything clean for a little while, about the idea that you could go somewhere so empty that even your own thoughts got tired of following you. That was the promise of Station 126B, and for the first while, it delivered. I arrived by helicopter, a military green bird that touched down for no more than 60 seconds before leaving me and my cargo behind. The pilot didn't say a word. He didn't have to. It was nothing but white in every direction. Endless snow and bruised sky, the sun low and pale, casting long, weak shadows across the ice. The wind blew low and steady, not screaming, just present, like breath from some ancient sleeping thing. The relay station itself sat low against the horizon, a rusted rectangle of steel and old bolts, half swallowed by snowdrifts. Beside it, rising from the ice like a crooked spine, stood the relay tower. Metal ribs, frostbitten cables, a blinking red light at the top, faint in the grey daylight. There was no road, no flag, no nameplate, just a door. Inside, the station was warmer, but only just. The main room was a tight, functional space. Steel walls, bolted furniture, and a white desk, cluttered with old papers and analog equipment. A worn-out cot occupied the back corner, beneath a narrow porthole window. There were no signs of the previous occupant. No personal items, not even a coffee mug. There was, however, a binder. It was black, heavy, and labeled in all caps. Protocol. I didn't open it right away. The first few days passed in routine. I followed the checklist they'd emailed me. Power systems, fuel levels, food inventory, and antenna calibration. Most of the work was maintenance. Checking gauges, logging signal strengths, and keeping an eye on the output from the central relay. The tower transmitted once a day at 19 o'clock. I was told not to interfere, just observe, record the signal pattern, and note any anomalies. Once every 3 days, I checked in by radio with the base operator, who never gave their name, just a call sign and a time slot. My free time didn't pass at all. There was no internet, no screens, except for the little green monitors on the signal console, and no outside noise, unless you counted the wind. It felt like being buried in snow while still breathing. At night, I read old technical manuals, played solitaire with a battered deck I found in a drawer, or stared out the narrow window at the sky. The stars up here didn't twinkle. They just watched. My sleep schedule unraveled quickly. Time lost shape. The sun dragged itself across the horizon like a dying thing, never rising fully, never setting, just circling, dim and swollen, like it was trying to remember how to be the sun. And by the fourth day, I stopped wearing my watch. I finally opened the binder on the fifth day. The first half was exactly what I expected. Line diagrams, transmission frequencies, backup protocols, and warning systems. Someone had marked it up with neat, efficient handwriting over the years. There was comfort in that. A kind of quiet lineage. People had been here before me. People had followed the same steps. But tucked between two dry appendices was a separate dog-eared section, labeled in a different hand. Special Protocols, Station 126B. It listed 7 rules. No header, no author, just 1. Do not use the radio except during scheduled check-ins. 2. Never respond to unscheduled transmissions. 3. If you hear your own voice from the radio, do not reply. 4. Do not look at the relay tower during signal dispersal. 5. Keep the hatch locked after sundown. 6. Do not open the door during a whiteout, even if someone knocks. 7. Do not leave the station between 2:13 and 3:13. I read them once, then again. There was no explanation, no warning, no indication if these were serious or just a tired joke passed down from the last guy. Still, I copied them down onto a note and pinned it above the desk. Not because I believed them, just because it felt wrong not to. The 7th day was colder than the others. A high wind moved in, and the temperature dropped fast enough to freeze the moisture in my breath mid-air. I logged my daily report, restocked the heating chamber with fuel cells, and drank instant coffee in silence, while the relay tower did its 19 o'clock dispersal routine. I could hear it hum from the station, a deep, low resonance that rattled in the steel bones of the place. Not a sound you could mistake for anything else, not like a radio or a broadcast or even a generator. It felt deeper, older, like the sound of the earth shifting under ice. I didn't look out the window. I didn't even try. Something about the sound made me sit still, my fingers curled tightly around the cup, heart thudding faster than it needed to. And when the humming stopped, I exhaled and stood. Business as usual, just following the protocol. The next morning, I noticed frost patterns on the inside of the window glass. Loops and spirals like fingerprints, but longer, more delicate. I pressed my hand to the window and left a clear smudge in the center of the design. Then I wiped it away. Didn't think anything of it. At least, not then. But I kept the binder on the desk that day, open to the last page, just in case. It's strange how quickly a place like this becomes your whole world. By the second week, I had slipped into a kind of rhythm. Not routine, not exactly, but a pattern. Like the way a snowdrift forms the same curve, no matter how the wind moves. I would wake, heat coffee over the small burner, scribble down the previous night's temperatures, and check the tower's systems. After that, I would walk the station's narrow length, inspecting panels, wires and joints. In the evenings, I would sit by the porthole and try to read. The books left behind were dry, almost deliberately so. Technical manuals, geological surveys, even a dog-eared guide to proper hand signal communication in high winds. But no fiction, no magazines, nothing with people in it. There were no clocks in the station apart from my watch, which I had stopped wearing somewhere around day 10. It made time feel strange, less measured, more ambient. Hours came and went like weather. Pale light filtered in and out. Meals happened when I remembered them. Sleep became suggestion more than schedule. And yet, the tower never changed. At 19 o'clock each day, without fail, the red light blinked on, and the structure let out its low resonant hum, deep and slow, like the last breath of a sleeping god. The vibrations would rattle lightly in the cup on the counter. The walls would sigh, and then, just as reliably, it would stop. After the first few days, I no longer stood by the window when it began. I told myself it was out of respect for the equipment. The rules stayed pinned above the desk, right where I left them. They had become background, not quite comforting, but familiar. Something to glance at while writing a note or sipping coffee. A talisman. Their odd phrasing no longer stood out the way it had when I first arrived. I didn't follow them superstitiously. I followed them the way you obey instinct, the way you avoid deep water, even if you can swim, the way you don't reach into holes in the ground. It was somewhere around day 14 that I noticed something unusual. It was a sound, faint but insistent, just beneath the station's usual mechanical murmurs. It wasn't a bang, nor was it a creak. It sounded like murmuring, a shiver of static that seemed to come from the air itself. I paused mid-log entry, tilted my head, and held my breath. The sound wasn't constant. It would rise and fall like a tide. Not language, not music, just a shape made out of sound. It felt like a conversation happening in the next room, except there was no next room. I stood in the middle of the floor and turned slowly, but the sound didn't change. And After a while, it stopped completely. I waited a little longer, but it didn't come back. So I went back to my notes, tried to forget about it. Day 17 brought the first real disruption. The radio, which had remained silent except during check-ins, flared to life on its own, just past 16 o'clock. I was in the back corner organizing fuel canisters when it crackled into static, sharp and sudden, like a slap. I froze. It wasn't the usual analog hiss. It had texture, like breathing, only wet and irregular. The sound would pulse, then dip, like something struggling to form syllables. I didn't approach. Instead, I stood beside the cot, back straight, eyes locked onto the panel. I waited a full minute. Then I walked to the desk, shut the unit off, and unplugged it entirely from the wall. I stood in the quiet for another 30 seconds, then turned to make tea. The radio came back on. No flicker, no warm-up, just click, then static. Same frequency, same unnatural rhythm. I didn't touch it again. I didn't write it down. The check-in that evening was different. I reported the usual. Dispersal complete, tower output steady, no anomalies observed. I didn't mention the spiral, or the sound, or the radio. There was a pause after I finished. Then the operator's voice returned, slower than usual. Are you alone? The question surprised me. It wasn't protocol. Yes, I said. There was another pause. Have you opened the door at night? No. Have you looked at the light? The hair on my arms rose. No, I said again. Silence. Then the faintest sound. Static but softer, higher. A voice was within it, shaped like my own. Are you sure? The line cut. The generator whined that night, the pitch higher than usual. I wrote it off as temperature variance, but the hum stayed with me, behind the walls, like a low insect noise that wouldn't stop. I barely slept. On day 19, I opened the logbook and found something I hadn't written. It was a single line, added below the previous day's dispersal report. The text was written in ink, not pencil. You are not alone in here. The words were shaky, uneven. The tail of the E in here looped twice, as if the pen had lingered there longer than it should have. But there was no pen in the station, only pencils. I closed the book and didn't open it again that day. The frost spiral on the window had grown by the next morning. It now spread beyond the porthole, curving down the metal wall, faint and uneven, as though fingers or something like fingers had dragged the shape into the steel itself. I pressed my hand to it, It was cold, but not colder than the rest of the wall. I stood there for a while, palm flat, waiting for something I couldn't name. When nothing happened, I stepped back and sat down, watching the light dim behind the frost. That night, I dreamed of the tower. Only it wasn't outside. It was inside the station, twisted into the back wall, ribs arced and glowing faintly. The tower hummed as always, but the hum was no longer mechanical. It had rhythm. It spoke, not in words, but in pulses, signals. The message repeated, over and over.
You are not in the station. You are inside the signal.
I woke with the taste of metal in my mouth, and the spiral traced in frost on the ceiling. I don't know how long it's been since the last check-in. After that final transmission, the one where I heard my own voice asking, "Are you sure?" I stopped using the radio. I didn't unplug it again. I just left it sitting there, mute and waiting, like a mouth closed over something too large to swallow. And I haven't heard from Control since. There was no confirmation, no status request, no copy that. It's as if the station itself fell off their grid. Or maybe I did. Outside, the light barely changes. I might be sleeping during the day now, or not sleeping at all. It's hard to say. Even my own reflection has started to look unfamiliar, a little looser around the eyes, like the image in the mirror was drawn from memory and not sight. The spiral has never left. It's everywhere now, always faint, always just out of focus, but there. Condensations on the pipes, patterns in the dishwater, lines of frost curling around the light switch. They're never blatant and always peripheral. I just try not to acknowledge it. It makes things easier. But sometimes, if I glance sideways or blink too slow, I swear it pulses, like it's breathing, like it's watching to see whether I've noticed it yet. The hum has changed too. It used to come only at dispersal, that heavy resonant thrum as the tower releases its nightly output. But now I feel it through the floorboards at odd hours. Sometimes just a flicker. Other times it goes on for minutes, vibrating low in the bones. Once I thought it was the heating unit kicking on, but the heater had been off for hours. I even checked it twice. And the second time I checked it, the dial had already been turned back. I hadn't touched it. I don't remember falling asleep that night. But I do remember the dream. The same dream as before. It was only deeper. Inside the station. But the walls were gone. I was standing in the center of the room, and the entire structure had been hollowed into a shape of a greater spiral. There was no floor or a ceiling, just layers of slowly circling metal and light, turning in impossible directions. The tower wasn't outside. The tower was inside the station again, and the station was inside of me. The hum filled everything. Then this message came again. Not words, not quite sound.
You are not in the station. You are inside the signal.
I woke up with my hand pressed to the wall. It was warm, and I wasn't alone. I didn't see anything. No figure, no shadow, nothing I could really name. But I felt it, behind me, just beyond the edge of attention. It didn't feel hostile. It just felt near, like someone watching you sleep. And that morning, I finally reopened the logbook. It was the first time in days. There were new entries I hadn't written. Night, clear sky, though unfamiliar stars. Light distorted through frost. Frost spiral, now visible on inside of eyelids when I blink. Tower remains unchanged in form, but appears larger than before. No signal on the radio, but I no longer trust its silence. Below that, there was another line, not in my handwriting. It was written in the same script that wrote, "You are not alone in here." Only this one read, "The tower remembers." I left the hatch locked for as long as I could, but the need to look, to see if the tower was truly growing, or if I was shrinking, became too loud, like an itch under the skin. So, one night, during what might have been dispersal hour, I opened it. The cold hit immediately. Not wind or ice, just a depth, like standing at the lip of a well. The sky was darker than it should have been. The stars were wrong. They bent too close. And the tower, it loomed. Same structure, same red beacon at the top. But it looked different now. It looked elongated. A spiral stacked in shapes that defied how steel should fold. Its base stretched farther than before, too wide for the foundation I remembered. And the red light didn't blink anymore. It spun, not like a siren, not fast, slow, methodical, turning once every few seconds, like a lighthouse that didn't care what it saw. I should have looked away, but I didn't. And when I stared into that spinning light, I didn't see a bulb or a lens. I saw an eye. It wasn't open, and it wasn't blinking. It was just present, seeing through me, into me, past me. That was 3 sleeps ago. I haven't opened the hatch since. I don't need to anymore. The spiral is here now. Not just on the walls. It's in the light fixtures, in the wiring, in the shape of the breath I see when I exhale. And I think it's inside of me too. The radio comes on without warning. Sometimes my own voice is there, looped in fragments. All clear, dispersal nominal, spiral pattern intensifying. No immediate threat. No immediate threat. Other times, it's no voice I recognize. And on some occasions, it's no voice at all. Just breathing. Rhythmic. Too slow to be human. I tried to write a final report. Tried to log everything, the way I was trained to. But I couldn't find the words. Only curves. I filled 6 pages with a single spiraling line. Even I didn't mean to. It just happened. The pencil moved on its own, and I let it move. It felt right. The station still hums every night. I still feel it in my teeth. But I don't dread it now. I understand, I think. The tower doesn't transmit information. It transmits presence. It isn't sending signals. It's dispersing self. And I was never here to monitor it. I was here to become part of it. Now that I have learned how to listen, it's learning how to speak through me. They will eventually send someone else, and they will find the hatch locked, the logbook waiting, the spiral carved into the glass of the porthole, and the rules will still be pinned to the wall. But they will mean something different now. They are not warnings anymore. They are instructions for how to dissolve quietly.